Welcome to Untapped Leadership, uncovering untapped school mental health leadership, exercising contextual agility to lead effectively. My name is Oriana Idas, and I'm the School Mental Health Training Specialist with the Pacific Southwest, MHTTC. And I'll be your host. A quick bit of where we are. It's the first session, and really focusing on uncovering untapped school mental health leadership. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Jenny Velasquez Newsome, founder and CEO of Untapped Leadership.
I am Jenny. I am the founder and CEO of Untapped Leaders, which is a leadership development organization that centers marginalized perspectives in the work. My prior work, I was previously the vice president of training and programs at a civic leadership organization here in Southern California called Coro, Southern California, and I've worked to develop cohort-based leadership development programs throughout the region in that work, in that space. But my background originally is in education, and I worked in college access in New York City and Harlem for quite a few years, and really gained a lot of my leadership even in that early stage career experience, and have gone on into my doctorate of education and kind of always worked in education in spaces that were adjacent, they're really supporting students at every level with their own journeys, either co-curricular or extracurricular in that sense. So that is kind of the on paper introduction, but I want to dig in a little bit to why I do this work particularly. So before we get there, I want to just go through what you can expect for today and our few minutes together this afternoon. Our agenda is, I'll start with kind of the introduction, orienting us to this work around untapped leadership, and really thinking about, who I am, who you are, really exploring, ourselves in that introductory sense. We'll spend some time framing leadership and really exploring and unpacking just how we're defining leadership, where those definitions are coming from, what has been the history of leadership up until today. And then we'll get into the Untapped Leadership Framework, exercising contextual agility. It's quite a mouthful. I'll explain a little bit about what that is, but really kind of digging into this framework of leadership that I think expands and builds upon a lot of the rhetoric that has in the past been not necessarily considering all perspectives as we seek to define what leadership is. We'll spend most of our time in this part 4, balancing thought and action. So we'll be in reflection, we'll be in discussion, we'll talk about some application exercises for you to take with you after this session. So this is a moment to just, if you have something to write with, or you want to take notes on your laptop or anywhere that you can kind of gather your thoughts, I welcome you to grab that, because we'll spend some time in thought before we get into action in that sense. And then the last bit, we'll do some closing takeaways and Q&A, and close from there. So some of our objectives is to explore the exclusionary history of traditional leadership frameworks that have thus far dominated training, learning pipelines, and other experiences in school mental health professions and beyond. My work that I do is I explore this kind of across the board, a lot of different industries and sectors this exists. And so I look forward to you bringing a lot of the context around how you've witnessed this or experienced this in the mental health professions as well. We'll examine how those outdated definitions persist in school mental health agencies, systems, departments, associations, school cultures, and other community-based organizations. Really, today's conversation is going to be, you'll bring your own experiences with this, but we always want to connect it to bigger experiences. And so you'll use and lean on your own reflections and your own leadership, and really kind of think, well, what might be outdated on a more macro level or connected to a more macro level that I can explore a little bit more. And then lastly, we're exercising contextual agility in order to identify ways to lead organizations inclusively and effectively from any seat to ensure optimal wellness for ourselves, colleagues, and our staff. I'll be exploring and interested to hear your reflections on the connection between wellness and leadership. It's not often connected. We often think about leadership as like, go, 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 carry all the weight, save the team, or, really this hero mentality that starts to embed into kind of the leadership rhetoric, and wellness is almost secondary if it's even there. So that's where you get a lot of burnout experiences and folks that, have just drained in this definition of leadership that we're holding on to. So want to understand that, want to unpack that a little bit more. So a little bit about me, just to kind of orient a bit more of why I got into this work. I always think that I bring people together to learn and lead authentically, really because I've had trouble finding spaces where I could lead and learn authentically. As I mentioned, I have my background in education. I went, all the way to a doctorate in education, and I never felt comfortable in an academic classroom. I was often the only one that looked like me in the classes, as I identify as a Black biracial woman, and so I just wouldn't speak. I just wouldn't bring myself to those places. And I, after decades and years really reflecting on all that's lost in that, I really set out to really think about how can I support others and groups to learn and lead authentically together as we do this work. I, talk about specializing in uncovering the untapped capacities of teams and organizations. I won't go too deep into this, but really kind of thinking about what's unsaid and overlooked as the value that we might not have realized that is right there within our spaces. But it might be that, our spaces aren't conducive to bringing in all perspectives or all types of approaches to the work or ways of defining problems. All of these elements are important. And so that's the type of work I do. I try to kind of uncover those untapped capacities to really just create these frameworks that invite our most marginalized aspects of ourselves to the conversation, to the center, because that really is, I think, my approach to this is that really is where leadership sits, where innovation sits, where we can kind of think about and explore our most pressing and persistent challenges with a new frame, is really kind of what have we not thought about, what's on the margins in those conversations. And so that's just a little bit about why I do what I do in this work. A little bit about Untapped Leaders as well. So Untapped Leaders brings together BIPOC identifying leaders from all career stages and other marginalized groups through a community platform. So I just seek to kind of democratize access to leadership development in a way that brings resources to leaders who like to join, as well as thinking about leadership through the lens of marginalized identities, really inviting those to the center as well. So that's a little bit about the organization, but I'll share a little bit more at the end. Okay, so why is this important? Oriana mentioned a bit already of kind of the representation, often that happens, or kind of the lack of representation that happens in leadership roles. And this is kind of across the board. I have a stat around the chief executives for all organizations through the U.S. Bureau of Labor. But I also pulled out a few statistics around kind of the percentages of those represented in a psychology workforce, as well as in kind of the American Association of School Administrators. These are a little dated in these data points, but it's just to name and really also to name here that, my work looks at racially marginalized groups. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the only group that is marginalized, but that we're really kind of exploring this this dynamic that is created as a result, that if there is kind of not a adequate representation, what happens? How are we defining leadership? How are we kind of thinking about our own leadership if we don't see ourselves represented in those that we kind of identify as leaders? And this is also to say that, I know we have a wide array of folks here, and I'm so thankful for that, that there's, this is all of this really predates us. If you do identify as white and you are in a leadership position, there's not this, hopefully this kind of guilt or discomfort around having occupied these roles. It's really, we want to kind of think systemically around, okay, well, now what does this mean? How did this kind of become created? And now what do we do with this? And so really the work around untapped leadership is just trying to broaden the definitions of leadership that we think about. I'm going to do kind of the very quick, not very long overview of leadership theory and history for the last couple centuries here in the United States, but then also beyond. So in the 1840s, the word leadership actually it stems from this theory called great man theory. And trait theory was also very popular in this time, where it's studies are really talking about, leadership was based on the personal attributes of men, not all men, who are charismatic, their intelligence, their wisdom. Really, this is where our first conversations around leadership, how we were defining leadership, stem from. So this is where it's starting. So really knowing that we are starting in an era of deep exclusion and slavery in the United States. It's until 1865. So we're just making sure that we're clear that when we start to think about how we set the foundational blocks of leadership, we're doing so in this way, in the way that, it was white men, straight white men, able-bodied white men, probably rich white men, wealthy white men that were essentially defining leadership, and also doing so in a way that kind of, sets their position as leaders, like kind of, they are the definition in that sense. So it was really kind of in this era of deep exclusion. But then it continues on in the 1940s, a lot of behavioral theories you might have heard of, or you kind of think about like behaviors that came about. Research started to shift into that, where either someone can be task-oriented or people-oriented, really kind of thinking about the right behaviors that a leader can engage in. And, this is all fine. I mean, I think it's really thinking about the theoretical aspects of learning about this. But I just emphasize that, it wasn't in a time where we were really considering a lot of people to be citizens, essentially, of our work. And so how are they even in this definition of leadership? So really thinking about, the lack of rights for our African-American folks in the U.S., as well as Black women, Native Americans, those in Guam. And again, we're just kind of creating theories, long-lasting, pretty influential during these eras that are excluding certain groups. And so we just want to be aware of this, and you just kind of explore that of, well, like, how does that play out? What is the impact of that? And then in the 2000s, what makes a leader, it really depended on the situation. That's where kind of the theories went in those early days of the 2000s. So there's a lot around, what followers will accept or reject a leader dependent on the situation. A lot of frameworks around that. But still in the 2000s, that was when our first Black Fortune 500 CEOs were hired in 1999. And white men did hold 96% of the CEO roles in that time. So still, a time, if you're thinking about what leaders are being studied for these theories, I think see that it's kind of just at a time that is not inclusive, that doesn't have the full picture of what leadership is. And so then today, recently, and actually about a year or so ago, I Googled, top leadership books to see what came up. And 90% of those results that came up, that I kind of scrolled all the way through on what Google offered me as books, 90% were written by white male authors. To me is just kind of the showing kind of how persistent and pervasive the ways we define leadership kind of, create this reality that we're only kind of looking at it through a dominant perspective. And not to kind of devalue the contributions of some authors in this work and kind of be really thinking about what the theories that have been brought, but we don't have a full picture. That to me is kind of glaring. So that's really where, my work and really thinking about untapped leadership comes in. And so, once I saw that list of that came up on Google, I was like, oh, I'm writing a book, forget that. So this Untapped Leadership book, it really sits upon kind of research that I did, exploring the leadership capabilities and capacities of racially marginalized groups, so racially marginalized leaders that are navigating their careers and really thinking about the strategies that they employ that have not been named, and really bringing it into this. And so this is where this work comes in today, and how we want to think about, the complexity and the context of leadership when we know that we may not bring all of ourselves to workplaces, or we may be, contributing to spaces that may not define leadership as broadly as we would hope. So I love that there's other folks in the chat adding some thoughts. So thank you for continuing to do that. So let me move us forward and kind of get into some of our work for this afternoon. Part of the work was really thinking about, well, how do I conceptualize what I learned from speaking with and learning from leaders of color and across sectors. And it really kind of sits within this untapped leadership framework, which, anything that is one-dimensional feels very flat on a screen and like very simple. But hopefully we can kind of dig into this a little bit more. And it's really around this idea of exercising contextual agility. And this is what I found that leaders are doing based on the context of their environments that's always changing. And so if you look at this model, you can consider yourself, you are in the center, right? You right now, today, in this moment, on this Monday, you are right there in the center. And whatever is happening is an interplay between you, yourself, the system. It could be, your workplace system, your team system, your family system, your organizational system, the mental health care system, any system. There's a kind of interplay and connection there, as well as your past and the future. So this connection that we want to explore and want to sit within is understanding that all these forces are informing the current moment, are informing what is happening, and it should inform how you make decisions, how you decide to lead, how you decide to kind of interact or make, the hard choice, or, change a program, or anything that you're kind of sitting with, should consider the full context of what's going on. And this is where we want to build this muscle of knowing that all of this is existing, where a lot of times, we get caught up in what's right in front of us. We always kind of think about and just think about what the decision at hand, without maybe exploring the history of the system, like the organization, what has happened historically, or all those elements, or really named what the future it is that we want to go towards. So really want to kind of explore this idea of contextual agility, because we want to get good at these aspects of this, understanding ourselves and our inherent power that exists in untapped leadership, either for ourselves, definitely for others, really kind of uncovering, the untapped leadership that exists all around us is important. Connecting our current realities to our historical contexts, both our own and our world. So really unpacking, we did kind of where leadership kind of stem from. That's really what we want to look at, the histories. What's the context of this current situation, our current question, our current problem? We want to get good at navigating systems that maybe were not built by all, for us or all of us, or not built equitably. How can we make them more equitable? Understanding the histories of them will help us recreate them as needed. And then we really want to crystallize that future of work. So really thinking about, the pain points right now, the struggle, the hard parts of today, and our leadership and our practice. Well, what's the vision? How can we name what it is that will alleviate that, will address that, and getting good at that. And then ultimately, doing this in real time, like really thinking about, like, how can we make these connections in real time, so that when it comes to an important decision, and where it comes to a moment of realization that you're like, oh, we've excluded a group, or, we haven't really allowed space for XYZ, you can be informed by all of this, so that you have more information to make better decisions, and ultimately, like, just have a deeper impact in the work and in the leadership. And that's really what we're trying to explore. So what we're going to do today really is this idea of balancing thought and action. I think this what sits at the core of exercising contextual agility. If you think about kind of, physical agility and athletes, you kind of think, if they're agile, they can move quickly, they can, jump from place to place, respond and react to, a tennis ball coming at them at 90 miles per hour. They're just very quick on their feet. But what's unseen is kind of all the preparation that happens before then. It's not that you just show up and you're just agile and you can move quickly, and you can decide quickly. It really is about spending the time before the agility is needed, to understand what's going on. How can you best prepare and best understand the context around you, so that when you need to move and adjust and make decisions, and kind of the next crisis emerges, you just know kind of what to do, or you're at least starting in a place that you have a better idea of the full context. And so that's where today we're going to kind of sit in the thought piece of that. And what I'll send with you is kind of the action pieces of that, so that you can use that in your practice in the weeks and months and years to come, as a tool to kind of build this contextual agility. So you'll see that we're going to spend some time in reflection and thoughts, and really utilize a chat, or again, I'll open it up for any conversation for you to share. But to kind of kick us off, I want to start right there in the middle today. Like, what's happening for you today, right now, this week, this month, this the start of the year. We really want to kind of pull in something that's top of mind for you right now to utilize through this exercise. So if you have, again, a pen and paper, or somewhere that you want to kind of jot some notes, take a minute or two to think about your response to this question. So when thinking of your work, what is a challenge or opportunity that is top of mind for you right now regarding your wellness and or leadership? I'm bringing it back in kind of wellness as well, because it is interconnected. So if the wellness piece is a challenge, that there's a challenge with wellness right now, it will affect leadership. So thinking about that is very relevant. When you think about yourself, like really understanding yourself, we all have different preferences in the way we work, different styles, different worries, different, there's just a lot of different things kind of informing us right now in this situation and in this scenario. And I want to kind of connect from self into past, and particularly really thinking back. And some of this is really already emerging a bit, but we want to, as well, get good at understanding how our lived experiences, who we are, our familial upbringing, our cultures, our where we grew up, all these aspects inform who we are, and therefore probably inform how we lead or should. And so really kind of thinking about, if you think about your own past, what do you uniquely know that can inform your decisions in this scenario, in this work? And really, again, thinking broader than just career. You might have the professional background and experience in that, but there might be more. If we expand beyond maybe what's typically talked about in leadership, there's probably more information that you can pull from that guides you into thinking about this. How does your past, your lived experiences inform your interpretation of the present moment? Really kind of spending a moment just reflecting on you and your past. When you think about yourself and your past and your authentic self, really exploring and doing an authenticity audit. Authenticity really talked about a lot in leadership now, really kind of bringing authentic leadership, authentic selves. I find that there's a point that I think, all of us can feel are most authentic, and dependent on the workplace, again, dependent on context. But I've often found, like, I like the idea of authenticity. I sit with authenticity. I'm at my best when I'm most authentic. But I realize that there's small moments that I'm not fully authentic. I don't really say the thing that I want to say in the way I want to say it. And so really there was a boundary there that I hadn't realized. And so I think unpacking that, of really taking stock of moments where you do feel really aligned with who you are, your past, your values, your leadership strengths, and all those aspects. And when you don't feel that alignment, and really getting clear on, like, okay, well, what is happening in those situations that cause you to feel alignment or don't, and really spending a couple weeks, even just jotting this down at the end of the day, just to see what comes up, what emerges, because I think maybe sometimes we feel like we are being our most authentic selves, but there might be some edges that we don't bring all of that, and then that is a cue for some of that untapped work that could be there, that maybe it could be an opportunity to find ways to bring in that authenticity, to use that authenticity in response to your challenges. So just as an action step for you all, and for those that continue in the future sessions, we will be power mapping systems. And I just want to bring in a few aspects of ways to kind of think about power in systems, so that you can add this to your analysis or your reflection. We think about, there's formal power, which is kind of those that have been granted power based off of kind of positions. So there's those that make decisions, they have a decision-making authority. It could be individuals, teams, groups, or it could be whole organizations. Really, there's that formal aspect of that. There's informal power, So we want to make sure that we know that there's a lot of power that exists that isn't necessarily by title. There's, opportunities to influence decisions or influence culture, even without the formal authority granted to you. So there is that informal power that is at play in systems as well. There's systemic power, really institutions that have power due to legal, financial, political standing, really kind of thinking about those broader systems that have power. Societal power, we have to name, we have to know that exists, and that, again, is centuries of existence. And so, really thinking about the societal hierarchies that are based on factors such as race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, religion, socioeconomic status, a lot of different aspects of it, so societal power and runs a lot of different levels. And so that informs our organizations, that informs our systems, that informs the work we do. To assume that we can kind of separate that out, I think I would caution against that assumption. And so really just knowing that again exists, and how is that informing the work? How is that informing your challenge, your opportunity? Just really understanding that. And then my work, I'm all about the untapped power. And I strongly believe that there's a lot of power that exists from having marginalized perspectives. So almost kind of the act of kind of having experienced life at a margin or experienced at an intersection of identities that isn't maybe largely represented, that actually gives you a unique window into the nature of a challenge, the nature of reality. Like you have this opportunity to really name that. And so I always bring in this untapped power and name it as power, because that's really what we want to explore and bring into the fold. So, an exercise that you can do is, as you've kind of thought about who or what are the power players in your system, really naming and getting clear of like what type of power is at play, because that helps you understand context as well, and understand, how you can move within that and navigate that as well. So to put this work around vision and envisioning to practice with your own kind of longer extended reflection. But I leave you with almost like a template to think about creating your own vision statement for your school mental health, wellness, and leadership, whatever has kind of come up for you with this scenario that you're using, or just much bigger. Really thinking about your responses to these prompts. So in my role, career or organization's future, I or we will ideally spend my time doing what? What is time spent on? Time and energy, resources, what is that spent on? What are you solving? What are you responding to? This impact that I or we will have includes what? Like towards what end? What are the outcomes? What's the impact that you're hoping to get to? The aspects of my experience and surrounding environment that will support me and us in getting there are, so really kind of reflecting on, your reflections that you had around yourself, around your past, but then also kind of the past of the organization or the team or whoever else that you're kind of thinking of in getting to that goal. Those are all parts of it. Like there's all aspects that you can think about to move towards that goal, to that future. And then really getting specific on, the marginalized perspectives I hold are X, Y, Z, whatever they may be, whatever comes up for you as you think about this. And they uniquely position me to achieve this vision in the following ways. So really going after some of that untapped power that I, hypothesize is here, the ways that we are marginalized, how is that helping us see this challenge in a particular way, or see the solutions in a particular way, or be the one to kind of really push this forward in a particular way. And then on the other side of that, the privilege that I hold that can influence that future are what? We are often, a lot of us, particularly if we're on this call, we're holding a lot of privileges. So what are the privileges that can inform that work that I can use and utilize to move something forward? So some of the ways I will leverage my privileges to center my or others' marginalized power will be by what, how can you leverage that? And for future sessions, we'll kind of get into this, what I call the zone of untapped capacity that sits in this interplay between our marginalized perspectives and then the ways we have privilege and how we can use that privilege to bring about the marginalized perspectives that actually can also help us make change or make progress on our challenges. So that's something we'll explore. And then lastly, kind of thinking about the systemic piece of it, the systemic influences that have a stake in this future are what, as a result, some obstacles may be. So really getting clear, like we've named some challenges, and we want to name that. And then also being clear about what the opportunities are. And so really this kind of vision statement template is trying to bring us all together and kind of think through all these different aspects to name that vision, to what's going to support you towards getting to that vision of being well resourced as a leader. By well resourced, I mean like being not necessarily money, but financial compensation, of course, is a piece of it, but really thinking about the wellness of your leadership. How can you incorporate all these aspects of full context to it that will bring you there? So what I leave you with is I left you with my example, very long and wordy. You've learned a little bit about me, but the one I wanted to bring up, and also it's kind of very a lot of text on the screen, so our apologies, but again, this is just really to sit with and take with you. I shared my vision statement, but then also Leora, who is the field director for the PSMHTTC, also shared her responses to this as well. And so I just offer this as an example to think about kind of the different ways that you can respond to this. Thinking about the ways that you have marginalized identities and really thinking about how the goals and future you want to see in your work, but then also, how that can differ from someone else. And so really, I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity to either stay connected with each other or connect with others in your organization to unpack and explore the vision statements of people doing, like, why they're doing the work, why are you doing the work, and what do you want to see, and how can you get there? And I think a lot of layers can be uncovered that we don't often talk about, in day to day, and our agendas don't really get into this stuff, but it's actually very important. Like it fuels us if you think about your own self, and it's likely fueling other people as well. And so how can we just really be open and clear about our vision for our work and our leadership? As Oriana mentioned, there's a few upcoming sessions that are put together for our any BIPOC identifying attendees. I also included some links and references, a lot of things for you to kind of dig into and explore connected to what we talked about. But of course, please do, for anyone that was here, I'd love to stay connected. You have the website there, but please do feel free to email me.
Thank you so much for attending today.